could really use your help. You're just so good at convincing him to come down." "Yeah, of course," I said, looking back toward my empty cup of coffee. When I got back inside, I was going to need another mug or two. Mrs. Wheaton held my arm as we walked across the front yard. "Looks like your husband is behind on mowing the yard. Maybe that's why Maxwell Lewis likes to come over this way. He's looking for mice." I swallowed hard. "He's been busy with work." Freddie could take the blame, even though 80% of the time I was the one mowing the yard because he was passed out after dinner in the recliner. Of course, Mrs. Wheaton likely already knew I was the one that did most of the yard work. It was just her passive-aggressive way to tell me to cut the damn grass. She was also incredibly nosy. Maybe she was hoping I'd talk about what was going on. It wasn't like she hadn't heard our fights next door. The walls of our cheap homes weren't that thick. Hell, the neighbors across the street had probably heard us from time to time as well. "Oh, no doubt he works hard. My husband is a plumber, so I know what it's like." A fact she worked into nearly every conversation we had. He'd died over 3 years ago, but sometimes I wondered if she still thought he was alive. Freddie wasn't a plumber, though. He worked in construction. Long hours in the summer, thank God, and not enough money to pay our bills in the winter. I hated winters. With it being mid-September, it wouldn't be long before Freddie's workload would start to slow, and he'd be home more. It was definitely not something I was looking forward to. "There he is," Mrs. Wheaton said, pointing at the same spot good old Max the cat liked to run off to whenever he got the chance. I was pretty sure Maxwell Lewis had needed a break from his pet parent and would come down when he was good and ready. "Poor thing. He must be so frightened." "Yeah," I said, walking over toward the fence that was half-coated with green and yellow mold. The ladder was still leaning against it from the last time I'd had to get Maxwell Lewis out of the tree. I rested the ladder against a thick branch near the tree trunk and checked to make sure it was steady. My first step was cautious, but my second was braver. It wasn't long before I was face to face with fluffy Maxwell Lewis's smirking face. "Don't look at me like that," I said softly. Maxwell didn't stop grinning. "You might as well stop climbing up the tree. Every time you do, I just have to come up here and get you. This isn't fun for either of us, is it?" Maxwell Lewis slowly blinked at me. "Oh, huh? Maybe it is fun for you." "Is he okay?" Mrs. Wheaton shouted in her squeaky old woman voice that barely made its way up the ladder to my ears. "Yes, he's fine," I said, hugging him to my body with one arm. Maxwell Lewis locked eyes with me for a moment. "You stay because she keeps you fed." "I know. I get it. It's a tough world out there." At the bottom of the ladder, I scratched Maxwell Lewis's head. Maybe he was just as trapped as I was. "Would you be a dear and bring him over?" Mrs. Wheaton asked. "He's just so rambunctious these days that I'm afraid he'll get away from me and bolt right on back up that tree. I don't want to have to bother you again today." "Of course," I said, and she grabbed my elbow while I held on to Maxwell Lewis. Mrs. Wheaton nodded her head at the house across the street. "He works really hard, but look at his lawn. It's perfect. Not a single creeping Charlie anywhere to be seen." I was tempted to take Maxwell Lewis back up into the tree and hide from Mrs. Wheaton with him. Instead, I put mowing the lawn on my to-do list. "Would you like to stay for some tea?" Mrs. Wheaton asked. "I have some fresh croissants I could offer you. Well, fresh from a day or two ago, I think." "I'm sorry, I can't. I'm expecting a call from my sister any minute," I said, tapping my back pocket to check for my phone. "Oh," Mrs. Wheaton said, unable to hide her disappointment. "Send your daughter over later. I'll wrap them up for her." I smiled, but I already knew I wouldn't be able to convince Maddie to spend time with Mrs. Wheaton, even if I paid her. It would take something far more enticing than some stale croissants to get her to visit. "I'll let her know," I said, waving as I walked backward away from her.